Hello, welcome. My name is Manuel from Kata Studios. Today we are going to learn how to create this simple div section. This is a div based section in Oxygen Page Builder, and we're going to do this in very simple ways. Okay, one of which you're going to create the section, create a div inside of it. We create this column and this three column actually, and make all of them equal. All these columns are going to be equal. Okay, but for the first one, we're going to plug in the heading text and the body text or the body content, and the next we're going to toss in an icon by the left, then a heading text by the top and a body text by the next to it, which means this icon is going to have a div guiding it, and this is going to have a div guiding the both of them. Then we select the div guiding all of it, and we can duplicate it as much as we can. That is the simple trick. There is no big deal. So let's just get into work. So the first thing we need to do is to toss in our section, and in section go to advanced, and we head in to size and spacing. In size and spacing, height is going to be 100% VH. Okay, this usually what I do for most sections, not all sections. Okay, this is what I do for most sections. Then the width is okay for what it is. Now, as you can see from the section, we can't be able to middle align the content in the section. So for instance, if we plug in a button here, we can only select on the section, we can only center align the button. But what if we want to put this button to the middle? We can't be able to do that. So that is where the div comes in. The div helps in aligning elements. So we select on this and we add in a div. So since we have a div here, we still want it to maintain the same height for the section, so we give it 100% VH. Okay, and the width we also want to give it 100% width. Okay, so that's cool. Now if you see, we are having a little bit of spacing around here. Okay, if you want to override that and you want your div to cluster to the edge of the element, what you need to do is to select on the section itself, then go to size and spacing, make sure that you select the container width over here. Let me show you very closely, container width over here. But before you do that, let me show you what to do. You need to remove all of the padding from here. Okay, all of it, padding top, padding bottom, all of them. So let's make everything 0 and then apply to all. Just watch. Okay, fine. We have applied it all, but we still have that space from there. That is where this comes in handy. So select on this and enable full width. And once we do, all our element is now in full width. So, but that's not what we want. Okay, so we want this to be in a page width, and we possibly want to allow this to maintain its content size. We don't have a problem with that at all. So I'm just showing you that in case you want to do very quickly. You want all your elements to jump to the edges of that particular section. That's just how to do it. Now remember when we said that you can't middle align elements in a section, but you can do that with a div. Now let's try this out. We click and we add a button, and the button is at the top left corner. Select on the div guiding the button. We can now center align, and now you see this little option over here that says middle align. So hit on that and we have the element middle align. This is just an example to show you what we can do. So, and it is very important to middle align all your elements in most container if you starting up your building, so that everything will be organized and in the center. So now we have done that. We need to create another div inside of this div. That div will be responsible for controlling the elements. Now, which means this div we added here is not responsible for controlling this element. We need another div to control this element. Why? Because if we use this div for controlling the elements inside of it, we might be having a problem of alignments. Okay, so the first div here is a child container for the section, but it's going to have another child div which will be full width, which is what we'll be using to control all these elements. Though we can still build out with this div, but the problem is that we want to build in a layout will have 3 columns, and those 3 columns we want to control them from the center, and we don't want to start adding padding. You understand that we don't want all that. So what we need to do here is to add in another div in the middle. Perfect. So now we have this div. We don't even need to start making these things 100%. We can decide now, watch very closely why we added that div previously, before this. We can decide to make this 80% width. You get the point now. So now we are in 80% width. We can now start building. You see, this is like 80% as what we have from here. Okay, so now what we need to do is either we add a grid layout to break this element into 3 and we start adding our content inside of it, or we create a single div inside of this and then we reuse it. Let me show you what that means. We are going to try the 2 style. Number 1 style, we add in a div, and that div inside of here, we are first of all select, once you add that div, select on this element and make sure that these elements are horizontally aligned. Horizontally aligned means we want it to align like this, not vertically. Forget about these ones that are aligned vertically. We are going to control that with the div we are going to be tossing in there. Don't get that confused. So we select this and we make it horizontal aligned. And once we do that, select on this div over here. What you need to do, we have to add a class to each of this div. Very, very important. Now, before we get to this style, let's use a different style. So this different style is using the grid layout. So when we click on the grid layout, nothing happens until we toss in a div inside of it. So now we're tossing in the div inside of it. Select on the div controlling all elements. Then here in the column count, which is how many div do you want to be inside of this column? We can say 3. Instead of now adding multiple div, what we need to do is click option and duplicate, click option and duplicate. So now you see we have 1, 2, and 3 equal size. That is if we are using the grid format. You get? So now we can start tossing in our element like this, number 1, number 2, and number 3. All of these 3 here will be inside of this, and this will be inside of this. I hope you get that very clearly. So now we don't want to use that format. So we select on this and we make it a horizontally aligned element. So now it's horizontally aligned. We're going to delete this and delete this. We only have 1 div. I've shown you how to do it the other way. That is a perfect way to do it. But I still want to show you how to do it with a div in cases where you want the first container to be 20% width and the rest of them to be 40%. You can't do that with the grid layout. The grid layout only allows you to make elements equal height or equal width. So for this one, we want everything to be the same width, even though we can also use the horizontally aligned styling to make elements to be whatever width we want them to be. I hope they get that point too. So now we select on this. All you need to do in this, select on the width from here, make it 100%. Don't worry. Okay, now we make it 100%. All you need to do now is click option and duplicate this. You see, it divides it automatically and calculates it for you. So 100% time divided by 2 is 50. So each one of them is taking 50% each. So click on option and divide them by 2 again. Each one of them is taking 33.3% each. Next thing we need to do, we need a space between each of the elements. So select the div containing everything. Remember, if you are inside a container like this, the color of the container controller, div controller, will be blue, but the one on purple is the controller outside of that div. So when we click on that pink one, we are actually going to the next element. If you see here, you are going to see another pink one, which means that this particular div is the one controlling this one over here. So now we are in this one. We can now go to gap in. This is where you add your gap. So we go here, we add 20 gap. You see, we now have that space from here. Now, for instance, we want this to be shorter than this other one. We can select here, go to the width, and we can make this 20%. And we select on this second one. And mind you, you can't leave this one 100%, and make this one 20%. That's not going to work. So we're going to make this one 40%. And we select on this one also. I'll make it 40%. So you see it, we now have 20%, 40%, 40%. Perfect. Okay, but that's not what we want. We just want everything to be on equal height or equal width. So we're going to make everything 100% each. I hope you get that. So now we've gotten our first layout. So now we have all of this. We first of all created a section and made it 100% width, created another container inside it, which is div, and made it 100. Then added another container inside, which is really, we just made this one 80%, and we didn't give it a height. And I'm going to show you why we didn't give it a height. You see why we gave this one a height, very important, but this one we didn't give it a height because we want the content inside to control the height. Very good. So now it's time for us to start adding our content inside. So number one, we are going to use this particular content, why the Academy. So let's just copy this and we are going to add a heading text element. So when we add heading text, this is how it looks like. And the next thing, we are going to add a body text element under it. So we have a heading text and a body text. So let's just fill in our text from here. So fill in our text and we go to the second one. I'm going to teach you something very important in typography right now. So we go to the second one, we select on this text and we fill in our text here. So we are good. So the first one, we're having a little bit of issue. Go to typography, go to advanced, go to typography, and in typography we can select our font. I like to be using Poppins. That's my favorite. So select on text Poppins. Then the size, you can now decide what size you want to use for the heading text. It depends on what you want. We prefer we use let's try 40. I think 40 is okay. So now the next thing we need to do here is I think the width of this being 80 doesn't make much sense. I need more spacing from here. So let's make the width 90. So as you're working, you now consider whether you want to make your work wider or shorter. Now look at the problem we are having. The elements lines are triple. We want it to be double. We just make it 90 so we can have more space. Fine. So now this particular one, let's do a little bit of styling, text styling to this. Okay, the alignment is perfect left align. It's not supposed to be center aligned. It's not supposed to be left align, right align like this. So left align, and text color we can change that to a little dark color, and the font size is okay for what we want. But the font width we want to make it a little bit thicker. Remember this one is very thick like so. So let's make it a little bit more thicker. Let's make it 600. I think 600 is okay. Now look at what happens when you scroll down. We are going to find the line height is too much. Just make it 1. Whenever you are doing your line height, make it 1 or highest 1.5. Okay, make sure your line height is not above 1. 1.5, 1 is okay. And 1.5 is even too much. Let's say 1.2 is okay too. So 1.2, look at how my own is. You see, this is 1.0. Okay, 1.0. So 1.0 to 1.2 line height for heading text. Any heading text you are creating, make sure you take these rules into consideration. Letter spacing, leave it as it is. Don't play around with letter spacing, okay? And the typography, you can decide if you want to make this capital letter, the initial text initial to be capital letter, or want to make everything capital letter. Is all up to you. When you make everything capital letter, it becomes straight line. You can use your font size to reduce it. As you're reducing your font size, it's adjusting automatically. The next, let's get to the body text. Go to advanced typography, and in this also we want to use the Poppins. Okay, the font size we want to go within 16 and 18 pixels. So let's say 17, let's say 18. I think 18 is okay. Let's go 17. 17 is perfect. So the font color, we don't want it to be very black, so it won't compete with the other one. So we make it a little bit of gray. Then font width, we leave it at 400. I think that is perfectly okay for what we want. Alignment, let it be left aligned. Line height, you can leave it as what it is, or making line height 1 on the body text doesn't make sense. So we usually would like to keep this at 1.5 is too much. Let's keep it at 1.4. 1.4 is okay for body text. So body text 1.4. We go body text 1.3, 1.4. Heading text 1.0, 1.2. So write that down right now. All your body text within 1.4 pixels and your heading text 1.0 or 1.2. So we are done with this one at the left side, as you can see, though this one is very thick. If you want to make it as thick as this one, we still know what to do. Go to the font width and pull this all up to 500, and we have close to what we have from there. So the next thing that is tricky here is how we can add this icon and also add these elements. Now to do this, we need 2 divs. One div at the left and one div at the right. First thing first. So what we need to do here is click on this and we add a new div. Okay, this div from here, we are going to make the width 100%. Okay, 100%. That is the first div. Width 100%. Now in this div, remember there is a div guiding this, but we added another div. This div is the div that we are going to duplicate. That div we just added now is the div that is guiding number 1, number 2, number 3. But the first div which we didn't use, which is this one now, is the div guiding all of these 3. So if you now try to create this element inside of that div, you are going to have a big problem. So once you have that div, add another div inside it, which will be the one that will have this. Now, after we finish creating our element from here, all we need to do is just duplicate and change our content, and our work becomes very easy. So which means everything we'll be doing is inside of this particular element styling is just for this one. We are not going to do multiple things for multiple parts of our element styling. So now we are good to go with that one. This is where we start adding classes. Okay, so the first div we added, we need to add a class. Call it div class. Okay, we add that class. This is the class that will control all styling we are going to do to this div. In case we duplicate it to other places, we still use that class to style it. The next thing, we have to add 2 divs inside of this one. Okay, those 2 divs, one for the button icon and one for this particular element. So let's do that right away. So we add number 1 div and we click option and we duplicate that div. So this particular one should be horizontally aligned, not vertical aligned. So select on the div guiding 2 of them and make them horizontally aligned. Perfect. Now this first div, we want to make the width, let's make the width 20%. Okay, 20%. And this one, we want to make the width 80%. Make it 80%. So perfect. So which means this one have more content than this one. That is okay for what we want. We could even make this one 15%. Okay, and make this one 85%. You just play around with what you want. Nothing will hurt. So we go to the div guiding everything. Usually you have to give a gap. So let's give a gap of 20 pixels so that we space out the content from this, from the content from this other one. Okay, so now we can start adding our content. Let's first of all create the content for this one. We click option and we copy this, and we have to add a heading text. But in that heading text, we have to add a class. Now, why didn't we add a class for this one? Because this one is only one. We don't have multiple variants of this. Now, when you add a class is when you are dealing with something that you're going to replicate again and again and again in that same section or in that same page. So for this one, we have to add a class of text h3. Okay, so we add that class and we can start styling. But before we do that, let's still add our body text and we add our class. So we call it body text. We add that class. So we have the class for the first one, we have the class for the second one. Let's just add our content for the first one and let's style it a little bit. So go to typography, Poppins. We use Poppins text, and font we want to use around 25. Okay, I think 25 is okay. So we have just one line from over here, and this one we are having about 2 lines. We're having 1 line from here. Here we're having 2 lines. Now to fix that, what we need to do is to reduce the font. Okay, you see it. So now we have to add the thickness of the font. Let's make it 600. Fine, and we are good to go with what we want from there. So this one we have to still style it a little. Go to typography, let's go to font family, we make it Poppins, and we make this 16. Let's make this 15 this time around, and let's copy our text again from here and we duplicate, copy and we duplicate. Very simple. Okay, so we are good to go with that. We have the first one, second one, and we want to give a space between this one and this one. If you watch very closely here, there's a space between this first element and the second one. So how do we do that? Select on the, either you select on the container and give the space, or you select on the container guiding everything and go to gapping and give it a gap of whatever size you want. Okay, so you see the size, you give it in gapping. The more size you give it in gap. This is how to do it if you want to control it by the container. But what if we have a button below here, and that button we don't want to give it the same gapping as we give to this one? All you need to do is select on the theme, go to advanced, go to size and spacing. From padding, you can give it a padding bottom of whatever size you want. If you give it a padding bottom of 20, it's going to give only exclusively for that particular one. But since we have just these 2 buttons, these 2 elements, let's just leave it like so. So the next thing, we need to start adding our icon from here. So here we toss in our icon. Let's before we toss in our icon, let's add another div from this particular angle. Okay, or this div doesn't even have a class. I think let's see that div. We don't have a class for that div. So let's toss in another div. That div, the div we are tossing in now is not the div that is controlling the icon. It is the div we use in styling this icon. I'm going to show you what that means. Okay, watch very closely. So now we add an icon. We can do this in 2 ways. We can add the icon, then wrap it with a div. Very simple. Let's do that. Or we add a div and then proceed with the rest. So we add an icon. Okay. From there, we can wrap it with a div. We can also continue with the div we already have existing. But click option and wrap with a div. Okay. So now we wrapped it with a div. We can start styling this icon the way we want. And the div itself, which is the one guiding the icon, we can style it according to what we want. So first off, select on the icon And this icon, we want to change the icon type. So clear out this thing and we want to select a different icon. Let's just select icon from the one I created. I created some icon from here. Okay, fine. So let's select one of the icon I have from here. I like this one. So we select on the icon size. You have to reduce it a little bit. Okay. And let's now start styling the div. So select on the div guiding that particular icon. You see the other div we now selected and gave a size. Why we didn't use it is because if we use it now, it's going to have padding by force. That's why we added an icon and added a div inside of it. You see that div doesn't have a space. Now inside of that div now, we can now add a space. Look at this icon have a space around it. That's a padding. So we go to size and spacing and we give it a padding of 10. All around. Apply to all. Now to understand what we are doing and that we are doing something right, we need to add a color to this. So we go to background and we select on the background color. The first one, we're going to give it a purple, which is one of my favorite color. So give it a purple and reduce the opacity very well. And now we give it a purple, we need to change the icon color to dark purple too to match with what we just created. I hope you get the point. Now that div, which is the purple, we can give it a rounded border. Go to border and rounded border. We want to give it a border of about 20. Let's reduce that to about 18 is okay. So fine. The icon itself is too large. Let's reduce that a little more. Let's reduce that a little more. I think that is okay now. Let's go down a little. Perfect. Okay. So now we are good to go with this. We have this particular space and we have this particular space. But you see the space between this is too much. So we select on the div guiding everything and we reduce that space to 10 instead of 20. If it is still not okay because the div inside of here created a space already, we can clear out that space and we have this. So you must not play around with stuff. It must not be perfectly the way you intend it to be. You can just play around with what you want. 27, let's reduce this icon a little. The icon we have from the front end is lesser than that. And as we are reducing the icon, this particular div is turning to circle. So we go to advanced. The background itself first. Let's increase the color a little, color opacity a little. Fine. Then we go to the size and spacing, border radius. Let's reduce this to about 13 or 12. 12 is okay because of the size is now smaller. Fine. This text, the color shouldn't be just white or just black. So we go to text color, we reduce the opacity like so. That's what we want. So I won't be competing with the main text color, the heading text I'm talking about. So we have this icon and we have this stuff. This is basic thing we want. So this is what we need to create. We don't need any other thing to explain. We don't need it. We are done with the work as it is. We are done and this job is a done job. What we need to do now is to select on this element, click option and we duplicate. Okay, click option again and we duplicate. Now this time we click option and we copy and we go to this other one and we paste. And we go to this one and we duplicate. We go to this one and we duplicate. We are done with the job. Okay, next thing we need to do is to go to the div controlling everything from here, though this div doesn't even have a class. So we should add a class to this one and this other div. But since we didn't do that, let's do that very quickly. Let's just add a gap from here. Let's add a class from here. Let's add a class of div space. And that class we added, we are going to copy that class from this one. So we give it a div space. And we add that same class. So we have the same class in this one and this other one. So now we have to add our gap. So whatever gap we add to this one applies to the second one. As you can see, if we add a gap of 20, as we are reducing it, it's applying to the both of them. So we see this gap we use from here is as far as that, we just apply it here. The next thing we need to do is now styling our elements. Whatever color we give to this one, it applies to the other one. So we say we go a little bit dark. We didn't give a class to the icon. Sorry about that. We are supposed to give a class to all icon. And since we didn't give a class to the icon, we can't style that icon separately. I hope you see the problem we are having now. We need to give a class to this div so that we can change the colors at the same time. But then you understand the trick. You can add and change those particular elements. Now, if you look very closely here, look very closely, you're going to see there is a little thin line around this. And this is the purpose of using a div to style an icon. Okay. Now we select on that div to add that particular thin effect. Go to option, go to borders, go to colors. We can select a particular color matching that purple. So we select this color and we go to width, make it 1. We go to style, make it solid. And I think that is all we need. You see it there? You see, we're having that thin line. But the problem is that this thin line we have now is very thick. We need to go back here, go to color and reduce the opacity to the minimal. Your opacity, reduce it till you get to what you want. I think you can see it closely. So we see that the styling we have for the first one and the second one is not the same thing. So now we can copy the styling and paste in the rest. Okay, we say copy style and we paste. And paste. We are going to be doing this for each and every one of the icon each time we make changes. This is why classes is very important. So whenever you are creating your own, make sure you add classes in all of these ones I didn't add classes to. Okay, so that whatever you are doing applies to the rest of them. So now we are done with our work. Let's recap what we did. Let's recap exactly what we did. So guys, we come up with this div structure to show you exactly what is going on. So as you can see, we have the div after the section. We have the div, which is the next one from here. I colored it a little bit of gray. Then we have the next div we created, which is controlling all elements inside of it. Inside of that div, we have 3 div, which is number 1 div, number 2 div, and number 3 div, which is the one we made 100% each. Okay, now inside of this number 1 div, we have a particular element, which is text element, heading element, as you can see. And we have the next one, which is the body text element from here. So we have number 1 and we have number 2. Heading text element, body text element. The next one, we now have this div controlling all of this. We toss in a singular div again inside of it. And in that singular div, we toss in another div and another div. So the div in the left, we made it about 20%, and the div in the right, we made it about 80%. And the one in the left, we added another extra div, which is the one we're using styling the icon. But we don't even need to do that. You might just add your icon and style it the way you want. But if you want extra layer of feature or extra layer of styling, you need to add that div, then you can do that. But it's not very important. All we need is this div here, toss in your icon, style it, put your heading text from here, and then put your body text to this particular part. So we have a div here to the left and a div here to the right. The div that is to the right, we added 2 contents. One at the top, which is the heading, and one at the bottom, which is the body text. That's simply it. There's no big deal about this particular styling. I hope this best explains this particular tutorial. So number 1, we created a section. Number 2, we added div inside of that section. And that div is the div controlling the alignment of the section, not controlling the elements we are creating, mind you. Then we added another div in the middle. That div, we just made it a particular width, maybe 90% or 80% width, depending on the width we want it to contain. Then the next thing, we add 3 divs inside it and make them 100% each. Then we added our content in the first one as we want, but in the second one, we didn't just add content. We created a second div inside of this main div. Then that is the div where we created 2 different divs. The one guiding this one and the one guiding this other one. Okay, so we are practically having the first div, which is the one guiding all elements, the second div, which is the one guiding all of these elements, third div, which is the one guiding the button, and another div guiding this heading text and body text. These divs are going to be vertically aligned. Okay, and that is how we achieved our work. We placed another div which we use in styling the icon, which is not very important. You can just start placing your icon and styling it from there. If you don't want to get exactly this style, there are other ways to style the icon. You can get a rounded icon styling like this, but we want it to look in a square form and not rounded, not square, not rounded. But that you can achieve with a div. So that's how we did it, and also have this a little bit of round edge stroke around it, which makes it have a little bit of aesthetics. So this is where it gets complex. This is where people get it confused. Whenever you are creating a section, create these three, 1, 2, and 3 are 3 different divs. They are standing on their own. Don't just come into this second one and start tossing elements as you toss elements in this one. No. Because you toss elements in this one, there is a div guiding it. You just toss elements in this one because they are all vertically aligned. But in this one, we have elements that are horizontally aligned, which is the text icon here and this text element here. If these 2 elements are just 1 element and 2 elements, we don't have a problem of adding multiple div. But we have 3 elements, and 2 of the elements are vertically aligned, and 1 of the elements is horizontally aligning that particular section. That is why we need to add all those. There are more complex elements like this one, we still understand what happened here. Very simple. This div guiding all of these elements, and the icon at the top left and the body heading text at the right, which is a div guiding these two and another div guiding this one beneath here. You can try out this particular section. Go into academy.katastudios.com and try this section and see if you can come up with this awesome section. Usually this is 2 divs, one for the image and one for all of this content. The first div guiding all of these elements, second div guiding all of these elements. Inside of the second div, we have 4 different div, up 2 columns and beneath 2 columns. Add contents as we want to add inside of it. So complex layout like this are what makes your website design unique and different from others. So I hope you understand that, and I hope you learned a lot from this particular one, and this will help you in your future project styling that looks a little bit more complex like this. For beginners, this is very well explanatory. Okay, if you have any question, drop that in the comment section below, and don't forget to fill in your content according to what content we have from over here. We will see you again in the next lecture. For now, bye, and do have a wonderful day.